Welcome back, everyone. I am Dylan. This is All You Can Board, and today we are talking Cartographers, but not the base game. We're actually talking about the three newest map packs that have come to the game. That's map pack 4, 5, and 6, and how they expand on the game, what they add to it, which ones I enjoyed the most, which ones you might want to check out and why, so that if you are interested in expanding your Cartographers experience, hopefully this video will help you understand which one you should get, or if you should get any of them at all. Basically, really quickly, these are, they can be viewed as expansion packs, but not in the same sense that I've had with expansion packs for other board games in the past. These are much smaller experiences, and they're more of like an evolution on the base game for people that I would say have played a lot of Cartographers, or just enough to have gotten bored of the, not even bored, but just maybe a little bit tired of the original experience, and you want some sort of thing to liven it up, to freshen it up, to make that experience something you want to keep coming back to. These map packs are going to give you new maps to essentially play on, as well as some new rules and some new cards that are added in. So just something new that you can have from the experience of Cartographers while retaining most of the base rules of the game, so you don't have a big like rules overhead that you have to get into. You can kind of just open this up and play if you know how to play Cartographers. Speaking of which, if you do want to know how to play Cartographers, I've linked above the how to play that I did on the channel. You can check it out and learn all the rules. I'll give a really quick breakdown here right before we jump into these, but if you really want to know the nitty-gritty and how to play, you're going to want to check that video out. Okay, so what is Cartographers? Cartographers is a flip and write game. It's designed by Jordy Aiden, published by Thunderworks Games, and I do want to thank Thunderworks Games for sending us these map packs to do this content on. Basically, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be flipping over cards that are going to tell you certain types of shapes that you need to draw on your map. Those shapes are also going to have terrain types that you have to draw and color into those actual shapes. You don't have to color, but if you want it, it makes it look a lot nicer. I usually don't, but I've seen some amazing drawings online of people who are actually coloring these in. It makes the maps look wonderful. So you're going to be filling in these different terrain types, and you have different goals in each season. So there's spring, summer, winter, and fall, and for each one of those seasons, you're going to have different goals that you're trying to achieve to score. So every single time, every single round of the game, essentially, you're scoring for different things. So you have to kind of prioritize your focus to different areas as you go to try to maximize your points. You're not necessarily trying to fill up the entire map. You're just trying to utilize the space most efficiently for the goal cards and point cards you happen to have out that game. That's a really quick breakdown. You're just drawing these things on your map, but again, if you want to know the full rules, check out that video above. Okay, so the first map pack that we're going to look at is the Frozen Expanse. That is map pack 4. Let's see if I can get this to balance here all nice. Oh, look at that, it does. So this one is probably what I would say is the most entry level of the three that I looked at. It's the easiest one to get into. It changes the least rules. It is the easiest to transition from the base game of Cartographers into this one out of the three we're going to look at. None of them are particularly hard, but just out of the three, it's probably the easiest. The Frozen Expanse does give you a brand new map. The highlight of this one is normally in the original Cartographers, there's these little mountains that you have to surround. And if you surround all four orthogonal, non-diagonal sides on those mountains, you get a coin. On this one, you actually have this like frozen lake, and the frozen lake is much bigger than a mountain, but if you surround it on all of the orthogonal, is that even the way you say it? Orthogonal, I don't even know. If you surround it on all the non-diagonal sides, you'll get 3 coins instead of 1. So it's a really easy thing to adjust to from coming from base Cartographers. It's just essentially like a bigger mountain, and it gives you more coins for surrounding it. The bigger addition to this game is, and what is it called? Scouted Spots. I thought I was going to have to look to see what it was called, but it's called Scouted Spots, Scouted Spaces. So essentially, Scouted Spaces are spots on your map that require certain terrain. So you'll have a single square that's kind of already colored or already drawn in with forest. You'll have one that's already drawn in with water. It's not saying that those spots are already filled in. It's just that to fill those spots in, you have to use that terrain type. So it adds more restrictions to the map that you're drawing on, where you can't necessarily just draw anything wherever you want. Most of the spaces you still can, but now there's these ones that require certain terrain. It just makes it a little bit trickier if you're used to the original, where you have tons of freedom aside from the ruined spaces that are kind of the only restriction, or not being able to draw in the mountains, things like that. This just adds more restrictions in. It'll make you have to make tougher decisions when you're organizing your map. So it's kind of a nice transition from the original base game. On top of that, you're also going to get 2 new ambush cards, and these ambush cards kind of tie in directly to these scouted spots. So The first one is Direwolf Prowl, and it says, after drawing this Direwolf, destroy an empty scouted space or an empty rune space. So basically what happens here is when you draw this, in addition to drawing the shape that is listed on the card as the ambush, you're also going to have to pick a scouted space or a ruin spot that you haven't yet drawn over and destroy it, which means you're going to put an X through it, and you absolutely cannot draw anything on that for the rest of the game. In the same way, you get the Frost Giant Advance. Frost Giant Advance says when all spaces of the Frost Giant are surrounded. So normally with ambush spots, you wanting to surround it with other things to stop the influx of negative points coming towards you. With this one, when all spaces are surrounded or destroyed, fill a scouted space or fill a ruined space with any terrain type. So both of them interact with these scouted spaces as well as these ruins that were already in the game previously that haven't been filled. Really, those ambush cards, the Frozen Lake and the scouted spaces, is all that's added into this, and of course the new map. So this being the first one that I came into from Cartographers, and to be honest, when I played this map pack, I hadn't played Cartographers in a while, so I was also refreshing on the base rules. It is a really nice curve to go into this one. If you're wanting to get into these map packs, this is an easy spot to start where you can kind of just take all the base rules you're familiar with, everything you already know about Cartographers, especially if you're really good at playing Cartographers. And it just adds in a couple little wrenches. You know, you're trying to see if this is the game where you want to try to surround the Frozen Lake and when you want to try to surround it. These new ambush cards you have to navigate, the scouted spaces that are going to make things a little bit more restrictive for you and how you build. It's just a really nice one to start off with. That being said, because of that, I would say that out of the three we're going to look at today, it's probably the least interesting of the three. If I was only going to buy one, having played all three, probably my choice isn't going to be Frozen Expanse, but that's coming from me who really enjoys Cartographers and actually kind of wants the complexity up a little bit just to kind of add some other things I can do in and some other, scoring conditions and different things like that I have to consider, where that's kind of not what the Frozen Expanse is really offering. It's just this kind of like slight gentle curve up. So I would say that if you're looking for just an easy step up, you want to play a lot of Cartographers, you don't want you don't want a lot of complexity added to the game, and you just want things changed from the original, this might be the one you want to go to. But if you're looking for a bigger difference from the original, a bigger change or multiple changes, then you'll probably be gravitating more to one of the other ones we're going to talk about. Very last thing I'm going to mention with this, and I should have said this at the beginning, is all of these map packs are compatible with not only base Cartographers, but Cartographers Heroes, which is the actual big expansion. I shouldn't even say big expansion, but an actual expansion for the game that was released. It was also standalone as well, but so I guess standalone expansion. Whereas these are just these little map packs. So if you have Cartographers Heroes, or if you have Cartographers and Cartographers Heroes, these are all compatible. And in fact, this map pack actually comes with Chieftain Drenny, which is for Cartographers Heroes specifically. So you also get an additional card, additional hero for that addition to the game as well. All right, so map pack number 5 is Kethra's Steppe. And Kethra's Steppe, the main thing it adds, pretty much the only thing it adds, is are beacons to your map. But beacons have a couple different aspects. So even though it's the only thing being added, there's a lot to consider from beacons. And I would say that out of all of them, the three that we're looking at today anyways, this is probably the most complex. And I say that lightly because it's not actually that complex, but it definitely makes you basically, in Cartographers, you have 4 scoring conditions, and you're not always considering all 4, but you are looking ahead saying, okay, even though this season I'm scoring A and B, I do have to consider that soon I'm going to be scoring C, then I'm going to be scoring D, so I have to already be kind of planning ahead. This is adding a 5th scoring condition, and that's the beacon scoring condition. So it's already a bit tricky sometimes to manage all 4 scoring conditions in Cartographers effectively to kind of generate the best score you can. To now have to navigate a 5th that you have to know when to trigger specifically to get enough points is pretty cool, but it also does add more complexity to the game, and it becomes a more thinky game. So that won't be for everybody, but for me, I actually really, really enjoyed that. I loved how much more it made me think about my placement and how many options I had of when I really wanted to go into beacons, when it made sense to it, and we'll get into right away like what I mean by actually like going into beacons, essentially turning them on. So on your new map that you get in your new map pack, you're going to have 2 beacons that are on the map. And I should have mentioned, there's also 2 sides to each of these sheets. So if you are bored of one side, you're going to get a completely different one on the other side that has the beacons placed a little bit differently and everything. So these beacons have a beacon range around them. So it'll be this dotted line that kind of goes around the beacons. Everything within that range is what is going to affect the beacon scoring. So in this version of the map, or in this version of the game, this map pack, you're gonna get 3 beacon scoring conditions. Just like the actual normal scoring conditions, you're gonna shuffle these 3, and every single game you're gonna have one of these random 3 beacon scoring conditions in the game, and that's going to dictate how you're scoring for the beacons. So similar to mountains, you need to surround the beacon on all non-diagonal sides in order to light the beacon. Now, lighting the beacon is going to be paramount to gaining any points whatsoever for the scoring card. However, all of these scoring cards, what makes them interesting, they have a kind of a downside and an upside. There's always going to be a way you're losing points and then a way you're gaining points. So you have to be able to weigh, am I gaining more points than I'm losing from the beacon? And if not, you don't want to light it yet, or you're just going to end up with negative points. So for instance, a good one to illustrate this is the Summit Splendor scoring card. This one says lose 6 reputation stars for each lighted beacon. So you might be thinking immediately, well, why would I ever want to surround a beacon and light a beacon if I'm going to lose 6 points? The next part says you earn 2 reputation stars for each cluster of filled spaces within the beacon's range. So essentially, if you surround this beacon too early without getting enough clusters, yes, you could have negative points for a round or a couple rounds if you're not prioritizing that beacon properly. But as soon as you have enough clusters in that beacon's range, then you're going to be getting positive points, and then it's obviously just a benefit to be able to go for the scoring condition. All of the scoring conditions have that kind of balance. They're not always going to lose you points just for lighting them, but it might say you gain, or you earn 12 points, or you earn 8 points for each lighted beacon, but then suddenly you're losing points for every empty space in the beacon's range or something like that. So it's not just a really simple thing of like, oh, light the beacon and I get points. You're lighting the beacon at the most opportune time, and then kind of fulfilling the second part of the scoring card to make sure you don't lose points overall. That to me was really, really interesting, because I was constantly wondering, okay, I know I want to try to score for these beacons, but when does it make sense to actually essentially turn the beacon on, light the beacon to now be able to get positive points? And sometimes you get a perfect shape for a spot, and you're like, oh my, I would love to put this here, but that would light the beacon, and I'm not ready to light it. It'll end up giving me negative points right now. So that was a neat thing to balance. The only thing I don't even want to say I didn't quite like, but it was just a bit of a disappointment sometimes, is that you don't get a ton of points for the beacon. So even though it's adding this 5th scoring condition, we have scoring cards like, for instance, the Borderlands scoring card can earn you so many points. You get like 6 points for every single filled row or column on the board. That adds up really quickly. It ends up being this big thing everyone usually goes for on the rounds that it scores for. The beacons, because they're active and can be activated at any point during the game, and it's for every single round, unlike the scoring cards, which is just 2 rounds essentially that you score for them, they don't give you as many points. And so sometimes it can feel like, oh, you surrounded this beacon at the most opportune time, you filled in the range and everything, and you got 8 points or you got 12 points, and you think, for all the trouble I went through, I wish I would have got a little bit more. But that's just kind of what this edition is. It's not something that's going to overpower and kind of overpower all the other scoring cards and make you not focus on them, and you're like, I'm just going to focus on the beacon this game. It's an additional thing to get some extra points, and in some games that could be the difference between you and your opponent's score, is who prioritized the beacon most effectively. So even though it is just this one thing added into this map pack, that one thing takes up, especially the beacon's range, takes up large sections of your map. You can't just say, I'm not going to, well, I guess you can say, I'm just not going to go for the beacons, but eventually you're going to be filling in spots on that beacon's range, and you might look at it and say, actually, now it makes sense for me to surround this beacon, or I have to surround this beacon right now, and I wasn't prepared for it, so I should have planned better. There's different things that'll come into play there. Either way, having that 5th scoring condition is just enough to think about to make it really, really thinky, at least more thinky than the original game was already. And the fact that you get 3 different scoring conditions means there's different combinations with each of these and the different scoring cards that were in the base game, that you have tons of combinations you can go through to have these varied experiences on a brand new map. So I feel like this one adds in more replayability than the Frozen Expanse one, and I just found the beacons to be more interesting than just having the frozen lake and the scouted spaces that's in the Frozen Expanse one. So this one was definitely my preferred one of those first 2, and I think that as long as you're okay with the thinkiness being upped, you'll probably enjoy this one. If that's not something you're looking for, Frozen Expanse might be more for you. I will also add that this one, if you have the Cartographers Heroes, this one gives you 4 new cards for that, unlike the Frozen Expanse that only gives you 1. So you're getting more bang for your buck if you have Cartographers Heroes in terms of the additions you're getting to the game. But if you don't have that addition, it kind of just comes down to what kind of experience you're looking for out of a new map pack for Cartographers. So that is Kethra's Steppe. I never call this one by the name. That's why I keep looking at it, because I just call it the beacon one. But yeah, Kethra's Steppe. That's map pack 5. Let's take a look at map pack 6. All right, and finally, map pack 6 is Hornhelm, and this is by far, out of the three we're looking at, the most interesting of them. I hesitate to say it's my favorite because I can't say I've completely decided on whether I prefer Hornhelm or Kethra Steppe out of these three, but Hornhelm is definitely the one that's adding the most interesting new mechanics to cartographers, and it's deviating the most from the base experience. So essentially what's being added here is a merchants, and the ability to purchase items. So there's 9 items in total, and you're actually going to get a second sheet in addition to your map sheet. So you're going to have a single map sheet that you're drawing on, but you're also going to have an item sheet that has the 9 items listed there, as well as a journal track at the bottom, which we'll get to in a second. Those 9 items, you can't just purchase any of them. Starting in summer, so you're not going to do any purchasing in spring, but in summer, fall, and winter, to start those seasons, you're going to flip a card over from the merchant deck, and you're going to have shuffled it at the beginning of the game, and whatever the merchant is, it's going to show you which items you can purchase from. So there's always going to be 3 items you can purchase from, and it's going to be, all the ones on the right, or all the ones at the top, or whatever the case may be. And only those are going to be available for purchase. All of them have different coin costs between 1 and 2 coins, so you have to have enough coins accumulated to be able to purchase them, and each of these items has a different effect, and all those effects involve ways that you're going to check off boxes, check off diamonds on the journal track. The journal track is a way that you can gain a massive amount of points if you prioritize it properly, in addition to the points you're already scoring from the base game. So one of the reasons I said Hornhelm is most interesting is that this can be not only a huge tipping point in comparing your score to the others around the table, but it also could just be a complete difference maker. Like it is. There's the max amount of points you can get from is 55. That's a lot of points. And if you go like really, really low into it, only check off 3 diamonds, you're getting 5 points. So if I choose not to buy items, I choose not to go for this journal track, and I only get 5 points. Imagine if my opponent gets 55. I'm trying to make up 50 points just in base game scoring, which is not impossible, but it's definitely difficult. So it's something that you can't just choose to ignore. Where with beacons, you might not be able to ignore it completely, but you definitely don't have to feel like you don't have the pressure to prioritize it quite as much. Here you definitely do, and it's a big change to the game. So these items are all really, really interesting. I'm not going to read them all, but I'm going to read a couple just so you can get an idea of how you're affecting the journal track. So for instance, the compass here is you may ignore ruin card restrictions, which is really neat. And then at season's end, if you have at least 2 or 4 unfilled ruin spaces on your map, gain 1 or 2 diamond checks on your journal track. So like this changes the way that the ruins work for you specifically. You don't have to work within those restrictions anymore, and now you're trying to prioritize not using them to be able to check off these extra diamonds at the end of each season. Another one here is the coin pouch. When you choose a shape with a coin, gain 1 diamond. So now you have this extra incentive. You already had an incentive sometimes to go for the shapes that are going to come with a coin just to give you those extra points, and in this case to also give you extra currency to be able to buy items. But now every time you do, you're going to get an extra check on the journal track, which is obviously really important. We have the spiked boots, which is when you surround a mountain space, gain 2 diamond checks. So now in addition to wanting to surround mountains already to get extra coins, surrounding them gets you 2 increases on the journal track, which is a big deal. So all of them in some way impact that journal track. And like I said, with 55 points up for grab on that journal track, it's a big deal to be able to prioritize that. And you're going to get 3 item purchases throughout the game. Obviously, the one you purchased in summer is going to be the one that's in effect for more of the game. So maybe you're trying to get one that has more opportunities for you to get multiple cash-ins on those extra checks on the journal track. But that's kind of where the interesting decisions lie. You're always going to have different items available every time you play at different times. You may want to go for different items, or you may only be able to afford different items. Certain ones will interact with different things that different terrain types you're actually recording on the map. So this one might interact with water, this one might interact with forests. And so depending what the scoring conditions are and depending what you're currently going for, certain items may be more attractive than others. The items make a huge change in the way that you play the game, and for some it might be too complicated. It might be I don't want to think about buying these items or these extra powers. I just want that essence of the game. And for those people, I would say the Frozen Expanse is the one you definitely want to gravitate more towards, because it keeps the essence of base cartographers and just kind of adds a little bit. This keeps the essence of base cartographers, but adds in this whole new journal track, which because it gives so many points, it ends up taking some of that focus away from the base game, which for me was not a negative. That was an absolute positive. It felt so different and refreshing to play it that way. But for some people, it might not be what they're looking for. But for me, like I said, this is by far the most interesting of the three, and it's the one that, even though I still think the beacons are a little bit more complex, this one seems at first when I sat down, when I sat down for this one, I thought this one was going to be more complex. When you get into the flow of things, you realize it's not so much that it's complex, it's just a little bit, there's another layer to think about with this track, but the track is pretty straightforward. You're only interacting with it, with the items, and you're only going for items that, you know, are going to make sense for you that game, that are going to get you the most progress on the journal track. So either way, this is a really, really cool map pack. This is, like I said multiple times now, the most interesting one, the biggest shift from the base game. I don't quite know yet. I think it would take me multiple more plays to decide which one I like better out of map pack 5 and map pack 6. But they're both very, very good, and the Frozen Expanse is as well. But it's just, like I said, it's a more gentle step up from the base game. And me specifically, I was looking for a bigger leap, a bigger change, and so that's why I gravitated more to map pack 5 and 6. Okay, so having talked about all the map packs, and you probably already have a bit of a guess on what my thoughts are here, I would say that if I'm not going to cop out and say, oh, I haven't decided yet. Now, if I had to pick, I would say that my favorite out of all of them is Hornhelm Map Pack 6. If I could only buy one, that is the one I would be getting. Next would be Kethra's Steppe, and the last one would be Frozen Expanse. But I'm really, really happy with all of them, and it really kind of depends how much you're wanting the base game of Cartographers to change. Like I said, if you want a very gradual change, you already like everything about it, you just need a little bit refresh, a little bit of variety to change that base experience, Frozen Expanse is probably where you want to go. If you're looking for a more drastic change, the other two, I think you're going to be happy with either one of them. It just, which one sounds more interesting to you? Do you want this entire extra deck and new thing you're interacting with items and merchants and this entirely new scoring track that you're trying to go for? Or is what you're looking for something that's a bigger change to the map itself, which is what beacons are, and then a fifth scoring condition, which makes it a more thinky game? That's the decision you're going to have to make for yourself. But if you were going just based on my recommendation, I would say 6, 5, 4 is the order I'd go, basically in reverse, but they're all really, really great. The last thing I'll say is kind of my final thoughts here, my wrap up, is that I really, really am a big fan of these types of expansions for games where it's not, you know, it's not drastically changing what you've already come to expect from the base game. It's not coming with a bunch of rules overhead where you have to relearn something. It's not, you know, an expansion where they say, oh, I'm trying to like make sure I don't say this in the wrong way, but you know, for instance, Feast Road, which is one of my favorite games. I have the Norwegians expansion. I haven't played with it yet. Braden actually got that for me, but I've heard a lot of people say, "Oh, once you play with the Norwegians, like you don't play base Feast Road, and like you need to play with the Norwegians." I've had some people say, "Oh, like if you don't have it yet, you need to go buy it. Like you don't want to play base Feast Road anymore," and that always bugs me a little bit because when you have a base game that needs to be fixed in some way, or if not needs to be fixed, like there's just this better way to play it now, it's kind of you know, devaluing the base game, which for a lot of people, some people don't want to expand the base game. They just want to play that base game. What I like about these map packs is that they're not really changing much with the game. It's just a little slight shift or a little slight addition or one new scoring condition or whatever that you don't have to necessarily play with them every single time, but it is something to kind of change the variety of the game. If you have multiple of these map packs, you can sit down to play Cartographers and say, okay, well, what do we feel like right now? Do we just want a really simple experience? Let's play base Cartographers. I'm just feeling like a little bit of an increase. Let's do Frozen Expanse so we can have that frozen lake and a little bit more restrictions on how we're, you know, putting the terrain on the board. Actually, you know, I just want to go all out today. Let's play Hornhelm. Let's have the merchants. Let's have the items. Like, there's so many different combinations of things you can do, and I really like that it's just these small, like, tiny steps up in the base experience. I'm a big fan of those types of expansions. It's kind of similar to, I mean, this is even lesser than this, but it's kind of similar in some ways to the Res Arcana expansion, at least the first one, Luxe Tenebrae, where it's not drastically changing the base rules of Res Arcana or like shifting too much about the game if you already liked it. It's just giving you more and essentially making the game better by giving you more options and fixing some things in the original or whatever. Either way, I hope that this video kind of gave you some perspective on what these map packs are, which ones you might be interested in, whether you're interested in any of them at all, and let me know in the comments if you have played map packs 1, 2, and 3, and if so, how you feel like they compared to what you're hearing about here. If you've played 4, 5, or 6, which ones are your favorite? I'd love to hear from you. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of Cartographers. All these different options and ways to play is just completely welcome to me. I hope they make more of these map packs. It's just a great little addition to the game, and if you're a fan of it already, you might want to check them out. So there you have it. That has been my review of map packs 4, 5, and 6 for Cartographers. Thanks to Thunderworks Games for sending us these to review. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.